Hello and happy Thursday, everyone. My name is Jamie Hinkle. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the Learning Inclusion Manager at PFLAG National. We are really happy to have you with us for something to talk about live today. And just like always, I'm here to help you out in the chat or the comments in whatever platform you are on. But I'm going to bring Jean Marie Nevada in to host today's conversation. Hi, Jean Marie.
Hey, Jamie Hinkle. How are you?
I'm doing good. It is very cold where I live today.
Listen, nobody told you to move to an icy, freezing tundra. Please join us here in Southern California where things are warmer.
Maybe.
Maybe. I'll visit you during the summer.
Yes.
Thank you so much for getting us started today, Jamie. I think we have a really good show and it'll be really fun. So I will see you later.
All right.
Hey, everybody. My name is Jean Marie Nevada. I'm the Director of Learning and Inclusion at PFLAG National. My pronouns are she and her, or if you use Spanish, ella. And every single week we get together to talk about something related to diversity and inclusion, specifically on LGBTQ issues and topics. This is February, so it is the beginning of Black History Month. Certainly something that we are talking about all the time at PFLAG, but this gives us a real opportunity to truly focus in on a few key issues, some people talking about history itself, which is apparently now a controversial topic. But this week we are kicking off with a really exciting guest. So a couple of years ago, we were doing our PFLAG National Convention, and we were lucky enough to have this man come and speak to us. And he made such an impression when we were planning for our shows this month. I was really hoping we would be able to talk to him. So I would like to introduce you to this week's guest, Representative Malcolm Kenyatta, who is representing Pennsylvania's 181st Legislative District.
Thank you so much. I'm just getting some hydration. That's it.
It's important because we're going to kind of keep you going, so stay hydrated on the questions.
Good to see you, and so excited to be back with you. I will tell you, I love PFLAG. So anytime I have an opportunity to be with you, I relish it.
I have to admit to you that after the convention, shortly thereafter, I actually saw you on Rachel Maddow's show, and we were all so excited. We were like, he was at our convention, and now look. So it's super exciting to have you back. So before we really get into the conversation, because there are a lot of things I want to cover, could you just tell people just a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing? So for people who aren't familiar, they've got some background.
Oh, absolutely. So, as it's on the screen, my name is Representative Malcolm Kenyatta. I use he, him pronouns. And I have the really distinct honor of representing my family and my neighbors here in the 181st District in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And other folks that may know me because I ran for the U.S. Senate here in Pennsylvania and became the first openly LGBTQ person of color to run for U.S. Senate in American history, which was pretty cool. When we did that, and to me, all of this work is really grounded in a really simple concept of how do we make government work for working people and for working families, for people on the margins, for whom, as you said, as an aside, for whom our history, our rights, our future very much feels at stake, feels tenuous, and we find ourselves litigating conversations and battles and basic human dignity, things that one might have been naive to think we have gotten past. But this is the work. We recognize, at least I recognize, that all of this exists on a continuum, right? We're all in a relay race, and now it's our time to take the baton and address the issues that confront us in this moment. And I feel very lucky knowing in this work that PFLAG is one of the real leaders in all of the things that I'm sure we'll discuss today.
Thank you so much. And I think you did make history. And that actually is part of what made me want to actually have this conversation with you, because typically when Black History Month or any of the historical observation months start, it's always about looking backward. It's about looking at figures who maybe we learned, or in many cases, too many cases, didn't learn about. But I also like the fact that we get to connect with people who are making history now, who are changing the game now. And so I'm kind of curious about what in your life experiences made you want to become a legislator? What drove you to public service?
It's a very simple story. I grew up right in my district, and that's why I led saying I get to represent my family and my neighbors. It's such a rewarding experience to walk around my district some days, and it just hits me. I was walking around these same blocks as a kid, having no idea what the future would hold and what a great opportunity I would have to address a lot of the things that frustrated me from that time and frustrate me now today. And so my sort of origin story starts with a moment of real frustration. My parents, I say all the time, I'm really lucky because I had the best parents in the world. They just didn't like each other that much, Jean Marie. and so, and so,
But at least
and
they
so
liked you.
they liked me, so that was good. Um, but they separated when I was pretty young, and I start there because what that meant for me is that my mom was ostensibly a single mom. Um, like so many families, there's that sense of unease, uncertainty, particularly financially, and we certainly felt that and bore the brunt of it. I had 6 different moves by the time I graduated high school because we weren't always too able to afford where we were staying. And so we were living on this block after my parents' divorce. And I am just frustrated about everything. I'm frustrated about the blight. I'm frustrated about the trash on the block. And I come home one day and I'm going at it, to my mom and just going down the list of things I'm frustrated about and I hate it here and blah, 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 blah. And my mom is in the kitchen, lit a Newport cigarette on the stove, okay, and she's listening to me have this sort of realization that things were kind of screwed up. And she said to me without skipping a beat, well, you know what? If you care so much, why don't you go do something about it? And I was like, okay, like I expected a hug, but all right, tough love. Okay, I guess. But you know what I did? I ran for junior block captain. And it was the first thing I ever did that gave me a real sense that I myself could address at least one of the things that frustrated me. And, I had to go out and get signatures to get this role and then go out and engage my neighbors to do block cleanups, to help organize the Memorial Day barbecue block party that we did every year and get the signatures to block off the street and all these different ways that I had my first engagement with government. And it left me with this real sense that A, nobody's coming to save us, but B, we don't need anybody to save us. And there's so much power in organizing, your neighbors and your family members to address some of these issues that feel and are so entrenched.
That is a better origin story than Batman. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to put it out there. Like, it is a better origin story. I love that it's saw a problem, was basically told to go fix it and did it. I mean, I think that's just so impressive. So could you talk a little bit about what your personal identity has meant to you in the process of running? I mean, you are a young man, you're a Black man, you're gay, and you are out. How have these pieces of your identity all come together to shape your experiences?
And so I love that you started, about talking about, Black History Month, which we're now, and what I always remind people is that first of all, Black history is American history, and these intersections that you mentioned are also American intersections, right? That is the power, I think, in so many ways of the LGBTQ community, is that we represent every ethnic group, every race, every religion, every every gender. We are the real another microcosm of the American melting pot. And I think when like myself, when you have these different distinctions, it allows you to value and see other people's distinctions as what they are, distinctions and not distractions, not something that we should ignore or put over there, or people are shoving in somebody's face just by showing up in the world as who they are and wanting to be treated with dignity and decency and respect. And so I think having these multiple windows through which I am perceived and through which I engage allows me to recognize that a lot of people are feeling exactly how I feel, even if they don't share my identity. I always say that, I think LGBTQ folks make better legislators, hands down. Because when you know what it's like to be treated unfairly simply because of who you are, you can empathize, I think, a little bit better, even when the issue is not about you. And so I really think that I go back to a quote of James Baldwin, who's one of the most prolific writers of all time, in my view. And James Baldwin once said, "I'm Black and I'm gay. I hit the jackpot." And I feel like that. I feel like
He
that
did
every
not
day.
mince words. I love that. And it's interesting, you frequently hear people, especially over the past few years, use that term of othering. And I feel like it became part of mainstream conversation. I every time I heard it, I thought, wow, queer people have known othering since the beginning of time. And it's interesting that you talk about what that perspective brings to your role as a legislator. So the past few years have been tough for many, many marginalized populations. But I think in many ways, we can argue that Black voters have taken the real brunt of some of the negative changes that have happened, specifically when we talk about voting rights. And I know this has been an issue that has been really big for you. You've spoken about it a lot with all of the attempts to change the way we vote, make it more difficult to vote. So where are we right now, in your opinion, on protecting voting rights, especially for people in the Black community, recognizing that so much of what happened was very clearly targeted at suppressing specific votes, namely of that community?
I think we have to do two things right now in this moment, because I think we are really in trench warfare right now. This is a war of attrition, even as a lot of the worst purveyors of election denialism lost their races. That did not nip it in the bud. It didn't go away. I did not see, a recognition or some aha moment that these folks had where they said, well, you know what? This was bad politics, certainly disconnected from reality. Maybe I should stop saying it. Maybe I should stop trying to make it more difficult for people to vote. Maybe I should stop. That did not happen. Okay. And so we need to recognize that the people who wanted to blow up our electoral system because their preferred candidate didn't win, those folks are just as committed as they've ever been. But I do think that even as we have a conversation about voting rights, we need to recognize that this assault on people's right to weigh in and engage in the political process is happening in tandem with people who do not have good ideas to actually solve your problems. These aren't like divergent things. These are actually the same thing that's happening at the same time. When you have one party who's made it clear just in their short period of time in DC, being in control of the House, the Republican Party has made it clear they want to cut Social Security and Medicare. They want to put the full faith and credit of the United States at risk by playing this game with the debt ceiling. They want to continue to support big oil and gas companies who have made record profits while driving up the cost at the pump. They don't want to do anything about dealing with what's a particular interest here in Pennsylvania, the ag industry, where so many small farmers are being pinched on both sides. I think about our cattle farmers here in Pennsylvania who struggle with having, only one or two companies that are doing the meat processing, meaning they can set these arbitrary cost increase for the people who are on the ground doing the work, providing the food that all of us benefit from. But these big corporations are able to jack up the prices. The people who are actually doing the work, they're not seeing the benefit from that. And certainly consumers are not seeing the benefit of that. I talk about those things. And again, I know it sounds disconnected from voting, but it's really not. All of those things that I mentioned that were Republican priorities are not popular with the American people.
Right.
There was just a poll out on Sunday that said that only 20%, it might have been 23%, of Americans believe that Republicans are prioritizing the things that they care about. That's a low number of people.
Yeah.
23%. That's not good. That's bad. And so when that few people support your agenda, the only way you can win elections is by finding ways to make sure the other 73% of people, 77% of people can't vote.
Yeah.
Or that you
Yeah.
make it as difficult as possible for them to vote. If you have a good argument, you want everybody to vote because you know that that's a good popular argument. When you have an argument that's not popular, you need to make it so as few people can engage as possible. And I've said this again and again and again, and I tweeted it the other day. When all a political party or a candidate can offer you is a list of people who to hate, when all they can offer you is a list of things to ban, when all they can offer is a list of groups for you to blame for all the problems in the world, those people do that because they cannot actually engage in serious substantive policy around things that would make people's lives better for LGBTQ families, but for everybody.
Yeah, I think that is I know you said it seems like a disjointed argument, but it absolutely makes sense that, if you are pushing things that are damaging to people that probably aren't popular, then you need to find a way to move them. And the only way to move them is by making it so only certain people are going to vote or certain people can't participate. So I think it's very much connected. I think one of the other things that is connected to this conversation about voting rights and what happens when that's suppressed is also looking at civil rights in general and broadly speaking. And we are certainly seeing some real challenges with that when it comes to racial justice. We are seeing another example just this week. Last week we saw a video being released, and yet we continue to see a lot of outrage, but we don't continue to see a lot of change happening. Speaking as a legislator, what needs to happen next? What kind of things could government actually be doing to significantly and actually substantively address the examples that we are seeing of abuse by law enforcement, disparate treatment in the court system? What are some of those things? Is anything moving forward?
Well, listen, I'm, particularly as a Black man, it is frustrating to me that in this debate, I'm offered two options that aren't a real solution to the challenges we face. Either there are no police, or there are police who are allowed to operate with impunity, allowed to dish out extrajudicial sentences for the crime of asking law enforcement why you're stopped, for the crime of begging to not be tased to death or to have a knee taken off your neck, for the crime of existing or driving while Black, or walking while Black, or being a kid while Black, or skateboarding while Black, or sleeping while Black. We know that neither of those options actually provide us with what we need or what we deserve. What everybody wants at their core is to walk out that front door every morning and know that the person you love best comes home when the night's over. That's what we all want. And I think that the question is, are we committed to doing what's necessary to ensuring that that's the case? I don't think the challenge we face in this moment is that there is a lack of good ideas on how we could reform our criminal justice system on both sides that provide the type of ability for people to get justice when they're harmed and wronged, for people to feel and be safe in their communities, and for folks to have law enforcement that they can trust. We don't struggle with a lack of ideas on how to do those things. We don't struggle with a lack of clear and convincing data on what could drive down instances of police violence. We don't struggle with opportunities to deal with the very real crisis of gun violence that people in my community are dealing with. What we lack, Jean Marie, is the political will to get it done. We lack the political will to move forward in a smart, substantive way that can reduce these interactions. And we also lack the political will within police departments to do the cultural work that is going to come, that has to come in tandem with the policy change, right? Dr. King talked about this all the time. Yeah, we need to change the law, but we also have to change hearts and minds. And we recognize that those two things have to be done together. Things that we value as a society are codified in our law. And sometimes we have to codify things in law, and then time goes on, and then those become core values. Sometimes we have a value that we want to codify in law. Those two things have to happen in tandem. And a part of what we have to change on the cultural side is this idea of the devaluing of Black and brown life by far too many people. The pure inhumanity, the sickness that it would take to kill somebody feet from their home as they cry out for their mother and to not stop punching or tasing them. That is something we have to do. We have to change the laws in a variety of different ways. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act lays out a significant numbers of proposals that we could advance. Here in Harrisburg, we've laid out numerous examples of things that could be done to deal with use of force, that could be done with not even utilizing law enforcement to respond to some crisis situations. And you can go on and on and on. But if we don't build up the political will, we're not going to get it done. And I am for one, sick of waiting for somebody to be murdered for us to have this conversation. It needs to be ongoing. And I'm going to continue to do everything I can to ensure that everybody is and also feels safe in their communities.
You know, I appreciate you talking about this. It doesn't have to be forced into a binary solution. And the solution is not binary. It's not all or nothing. But unfortunately, part of the issue is that people continue to get murdered. And we now continue to watch video of it on television. And it still doesn't do it in the same way that a classroom full of dead children didn't change anything on guns either. And I think that is some of the inertia and the challenge that we have. You know, you just talked about we need to address the devaluing of certain lives. And I think that is at the core of so many of the conversations that we're having across lots of different identities. Something that's particularly on my mind as I particularly went through the morning news cycle today is about education and the devaluing of certain lives in education. We have certainly see things in Florida, which probably got the most news, but Florida is not an isolated state when we talk about the banning of even teaching certain things, teaching about racial justice, teaching Black history, teaching queer history. And a lot of this is being pushed under the banner of parental rights. How do you respond when you hear something like that? Because I think it is such a distraction from what we're really actually trying to get to.
So, you know, first I would say, what parents are we talking about? You know, we're talking about some parents' rights. A lot of parents that I know want their kids to be educated in math, reading, science. They want them to have a real honest grasp of our history so that they understand the context in which they are living and understand the impact that they can have in making the world a better place. You know, when we talk about so many of these policies, what is clear to me is that these policies actually do nothing to protect children, but do a lot to ensure that more children think about taking their own lives. The Trevor Project is, I know, a partner of yours, and has done so much in-depth research on this. I read a report which may have included data from Trevor, but maybe from some other sources, and so forgive me. But what the report said was jarring, and it showed through analysis of Google search trends that in areas where anti-trans legislation or regulations are pushed out by school boards or by state legislatures, that there is a statistically significant and deeply worrying increase in people searching for ways to commit self-harm, ways to no longer be with us. You know, to have the governor of Utah also say in his veto message of this ridiculous protecting girls in sports bills, whatever it was, that what he wants to do is ensure that our kids live, that kids in Utah live. And I share that view of kids all across the country who right now have adults who believe that bullying little kids is their way to expand their political salience among their base and to get more eyeballs and attention, you know, to you know, and this is the power of PFLAG. You know, I think at the national convention, I talked about my coming out story and how difficult it was and how I wished, you know, my mom had engaged in a PFLAG, you know, class. And luckily before she passed, we were able to really rebuild our relationship. But I will say no parent or teacher should be in a position to be a kid's first bully. And when you tell a child that who they are, that their very existence is something wrong with it, you are telling them that they don't matter, that they're not valued. And kids are smarter than we give them credit for. They recognize what that means. And they recognize what you're saying to them by virtue. And this generation, I think, is even more adept because of technology and other things at being able to name you know, the things that they are feeling in response to this. But in some instances, they're not able to name it. And so what it means is that we're seeing a big increase in mental health issues with our young people. I already mentioned, you know, some of the most extreme, painful examples of folks who are actually even looking for opportunities to no longer be with us. But the question is, if a lot of these people truly valued life, the question would be, which lives do you value? If you value parents' input, the question would be, which parents do you value?
Yeah. And I think that's where we start to see that real disparity. I think that is such a great way to put it, because that is ultimately what this is coming down to. And I think that first question of which parents' rights is kind of a big one. I do have one more question for you, because Jamie is letting me know that we are almost down to time. And this is perhaps a really important one. As somebody from the Philadelphia area, I need to know if it is absolutely true that Philadelphia sports fans have in fact evolved to the point that they can actually climb a greased lamppost. Is this a true statement, Representative Kenyatta?
First of all, it's true, but I will say we've always had this skill. Okay, so you know, so the poles will be climbed when we win. They'll be climbed, you know, in the tough situations where we lose. But I will tell you, this is a special moment for the Eagles going to the Super Bowl yet again for Philadelphia, for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and I would just say very succinctly, go Birds.
Those may be considered the most controversial things that you have said all through this interview, but I'm going to go with it. Representative Kenyatta, thank you so much for joining us. You are awesome. This was a great conversation.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you for all the work that PFLAG does for so many families, and I'm always excited to partner with you however I can.
Thank you so much. Take care of yourself. We will see you again soon. Well, everybody, that gets us to the end of another show. I was so excited to have that conversation. I never even told you about this week's article. So we have a great article for you this week. It is posted on our website. And it is from Good, and it is 38 ways to intentionally celebrate Black History Month. And you can get that article at straightforequality.org/STTA Live. Big thanks to Representative Kenyatta, who always gives a great conversation and gives us lots of stuff to think about. Next week, we are going to be continuing this conversation, again, taking a little bit of a different twist on it. So make sure that you join us. If you need any help between now and next week, you can always visit us at pflag.org to locate your nearest chapter or get resources. And we will sign off the way we do every single week, reminding you to do 3 things, which are to run fast, to laugh hard, and most of all, to please be kind. We'll see you again next week on Something to Talk About Live. Thanks, everyone.